Hello and welcome again to the Big Marketing Show. I'm your host, Malcolm Auld, and today we're going to have a lot of fun. Excuse me, I've just lost my voice for a second. Bear with me on that. Today is quite interactive, and what we're going to do is involve you through two tools. One is a QR code, which will come up on the screen shortly, but the other one, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen now, is a Q&A function. And that will allow you to include questions throughout the program that will appear in an iPad that I've got secreted away, and we'll come back to those towards the end. But what we'd like you to do now is, what you usually do with a QR code, is scan this one here, and when you scan it, it will open up a map of the world. And all you need to do is move the pen with your finger to place your geographic location so we can see where you are. I think we have at least 20 countries registered today. So have a scan, bring it up and start to pin where you are. I can see we've got some people there in Brisbane, by the looks, the UK, Sydney. And I know we've got a couple in South America, even as far away as Alaska, so we have quite a few. Now, another piece of housekeeping for you today is that when Tom speaks, you've got to attune your ear to the California accent, and when Ryan speaks, you've got to tune your ear to the Aussie accent, mate. So listen to on the same level as you are listening to me. So without further ado, let's welcome our two guests, though I suspect you all know their work. Tom Fishburne, aka the Marketoonist, he first started drawing cartoons on the backs of business cases as a Harvard Business School student, and I think I attended similar lectures to you, Tom. From an email cartoon to co-workers in 2002, Tom's Marketoonist series has grown by word of mouth to reach 500,000 readers a week. His cartoons have been featured by the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company magazine, the New York Times. They've appeared twice on billboard ads in Times Square, not many can say that, and they once helped win a Guinness World Record. Welcome, Tom. I'm looking forward to hearing about your experience in Cannes last month as well, towards the end of the show.
Thank you. It is such a treat to be here. Really appreciate being on the show and excited to finally meet Ryan, who I've been a big fan of for a while. Okay, well, we're going to start that bromance a little shortly, but Dr. Ryan Wallman, aka Dr. Draper, is in fact a qualified GP who decided he preferred to write advertising copy than write prescriptions for patients. Luckily, he uses a keyboard so he can read what he writes. He's Executive Creative Director and the Head of Copy at Wallman, which is a Melbourne-based creative agency that specialises in healthcare marketing. In his former life, as I said, he was a doctor and he worked for several years in psychiatry, which is a great apprenticeship, I can tell you now, for working in advertising. I think I could be a qualified psychiatrist after my years. He's written for numerous industry publications, including Marketing Week, the Australian Financial Review, and the Economic Times.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. It's a pleasure to be here and great to be here with Tom as well. Definitely romance. It's been going for a while.
I was surrounded by so much great material. So I had been drawing this cartoon for 2 years in business school and showing up in the student paper, and I found it was this great outlet that we were all going through this collective experience together and all experiencing these things that we could poke fun at. So I started drawing this cartoon in business school. It was a lot of fun, and when I graduated and no longer had the student paper, I thought that would be it. And then I found myself at General Mills, a large organization, and I found myself with similar types of material happening around me. And I thought, I'll just start a cartoon about my day job. Initially, I thought it would just be relevant to my coworkers. And so I sent it out to my class of associate marketing managers at General Mills. There were like 30 or so of us, and said, I've been doing this cartoon in business school. I think I'm going to keep it going, but about what we do here. At the time, I called it Brand Camp because it felt like we were all going through camp together. And right. I had this idea that I would just sort of parody all the things that we were going through. And then I had this sign up feature, and people started to subscribe from all over the place. And within a few weeks, it was a few hundred, and then a few thousand, and then it kind of took on its own momentum. And this October, it'll be 22 years of drawing this cartoon nearly every week about marketing and a little bit like my own diary in marketing, but as I've discovered over time, we're all going through many of the same things at the same time.
Yeah, and there's a whole new generation sitting in those business school classes as well, so you might have competition soon.
So how many cartoons? So. I think we need our sense of humor more than ever.
Yeah, well, how many cartoons do you create a week?
I create one cartoon for my main Marketoonist account every week or nearly there. And then I usually create at least 5 to 10 other cartoons that are collaborations with brands. I do a lot of work with companies helping them use cartoons and humor to talk about topics that are sometimes hard to talk about another way.
And where do you find your inspiration, you know, as being so prolific?
There's never a shortage, to be honest. There's so many things that are happening in our industry. I try to keep my fingers on the pulse through all the clients I work with, and then people hit reply and send me things. They sometimes forget I'm not on NDA. And so I hear all sorts of stories happening in companies all over the place. So I definitely mine that for material.
Right.
But to be honest, a lot of the role that I see the cartoons playing as a chance to hold the mirror up to what we do. Too often we can kind of get in a marketing bubble of sorts. And so a lot of my material comes from just walking around and being a human marketed to, and what that like and what that experience is like.
I think more marketers need to be their own customers. So let's have a look at a couple. I mean, I really like this one because it defines the digital marketing industry's zealots, and it still does. They're still out there. This is your dog cartoon. No, sorry. The first one here is your brand camp. This is one of your early ones. I'm ahead of myself here.
Yeah, this is a real early one. This is back when I was calling it brand camp, and this came directly from my experience going through an extreme number of meetings to try to describe the brand promise of our brand. And so I kind of take it panel by panel. You'll see over time my cartoons, I try to simplify over time because it's hard to read that much. But I go at one point I go through laddering the benefits, and there's taste, there's health, and at the very top world peace, and they're saying I think we can go higher. And so that's an example of sitting in a meeting, hearing the way we're talking about things, and then finding a way to represent that in a way that seemed to strike a chord with a lot of folks. So that was definitely an early one. That was probably about 18 months in to drawing these marketing.
And one time at brand camp, yes. You can hear that coming from the movie. Okay, we've got a couple of others to have a quick look at. So let's bring up your dog cartoon. Here it is.
Yeah, so here we have a bunch of dogs around a table. We need to stay focused on our marketing priorities and not get distracted by every shiny new, look, squirrel. And this one, I think I drew maybe 8, 9 years ago, but it's one of those evergreen situations where I think marketers are on the front lines usually of change happening. And the risk is that we tend to, we can often get so excited about the shiny new thing, we get distracted from the real fundamentals. So this is something I probably a theme I touch on more than any other theme is this shiny new object syndrome that keeps happening.
Yeah, well, it's been going for 20 years now, and it doesn't seem to let up. The latest one is AI, isn't it? So, okay, what about this one? What triggered you to create this? I think I know, our Trojan horse.
Yeah, so careful, the last content was full of marketing. This came out of a time early in content marketing where I started to hear it described as a Trojan horse strategy over and over again. This is a Trojan horse, a way to get your message, through the gatekeepers, breaking through the clutter. And it just struck me as funny because the actual Trojan horse, in the original story, the soldiers came out and killed everybody. So it's like, I just thought it'd be funny to literally represent Trojan horse at the gates.
At the gates.
And then this one seemed to really strike a chord.
Well, you're pretty spot on there because Junta 42 was a digital agency and they manufactured the thing called the Content Marketing Institute. It's a new business tool and they couldn't believe that people bought it. They thought they might get away with it for a couple of years, but suddenly content marketing became a thing. Yet it was really just a new business tool for their agency. So here we are. Thanks for that, and good to see some insight. Ryan, you've now co-authored 2 books that crucify the industry. What was the starting point for that? What got you motivated to do that?
Well, to be honest, one of the inspirations was Tom, because when I started out, which it's less than 20 years ago, but I saw so much industry commentary that that really struck me as being nonsense, and particularly having come from a medical background where so much has to be evidence based, and there was so little of that, and so much just conjecture. So I think Tom's cartoons were one of the first things that I saw that really, took the piss a bit. So I think it gave me some confidence to do that.
And how did you end up partnering with Giles in England? That's like, you're sitting in Melbourne, he's in England. How did you get together to create these?
Yeah, it was quite fortuitous, really. We'd been connected on Twitter for a few years, and I'd collected, a few of those satirical posts and articles and so on that I'd done, and realised that I'd accumulated quite a lot of that material, and wanted to give it a bit of permanence rather than just lying around on Twitter and so on. And so I just sent out a tweet and said, I'm thinking about putting together a book. Does anyone want to design it for me? And he sent me a message, and it kind of went from there. And yeah.
If only all marketing was that easy.
I know.
I mean, I've followed both of you for a long time, and I used to really relish your tweets as much as the cartoons. So I see what you're saying. What's been the reaction from the industry? Have you had hate mail?
Not a lot of hate mail, no. I get the odd kind of snide comment to the effect of, do you ever say anything positive about the industry, which I think is a bit harsh. But in general, it's been it has been very positive. And I think probably the sense that I get is that there's this really palpable feeling of relief that people like Tom and I, are actually calling out some of this stuff. Because I think, as Tom alluded to earlier, a lot of people are going through the same things and feeling the same way about this stuff. And I think there's a real undercurrent of frustration with the status quo in some ways. So I think it's good that people are actually, I think that resonates with them.
Yep. Okay. Well, for the audience's sake, I have asked Ryan to send some of his favourite examples from the books, and we'll be looking at some of them today. But for you, what I'd like to do is you can actually comment on those, and we're going to invite you during Ryan's discussion to make comments. But we'll get to that. But just be prepared for it. So, your first, let's have a look at this first one, which we put up, which is the marketing terms. I really like this. You've said it's the industry's ridiculousness and pretentiousness at naming established forms of marketing with new names. Do you want to take us through a couple of these and where this came from?
Sure. Well, I think your example of content marketing was a perfect illustration of that trend. Just constantly trying to rename things that have been around for a long time in many cases. So customer-centric marketing, as a reframing of, it really is just marketing. So there's this tautologous approach to some of these terms. Omni-channel brand amplification. I mean, that was a bit of a neologism of mine for advertising, but I really don't think it's any more ridiculous than most of the made-up terms that we see. Key demographic, group of customers chosen on a completely arbitrary basis. Note always Gen Z or Gen Z for Tom. Just this real fixation with things like demographics and so on. That we tend to get obsessed with.
Have you ever been? These are spot on. Have you ever been in a meeting where a chance where one of the users, somebody's used one of these buzzwords, and you've had a chance to actually redefine what they've said using your your naming process?
Yeah, I'm not particularly confrontational, to be honest, but yes, there was one time when someone talked about customer-centric marketing, and so I gently asked, what non-customer-centric marketing would be,
exactly.
As a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. It's like performance marketing as against underperformance, or matinee performance.
Exactly.
Curiously, the more things change, the more they stay the same. In the 1980s, these same discussions were being had. You had labels like above the line, below the line, through the line. Then came brand response. Ogilvy had orchestration to define its integrated offering. Y&R had the whole egg. So there's really nothing new. Why do you think we're fascinated with creating new labels for existing marketing terms?
Well, I think it's partly what Tom was talking about earlier, which is this, this obsession with shiny new things. But I do think that it comes down in many cases to kind of insecurity. I think some marketers, or maybe even many marketers, feel slightly ashamed of what they do, and so they want to kind of give the role more gravitas. And I don't think that's necessary. I really respect marketing. But by the same token, I don't think, it's not nuclear physics that we're doing here. And I really don't think there's any need to overcomplicate it. And in fact, often, it is counterproductive. So
we are definitely guilty of overcomplicating. Tom, your thoughts on that, why we have to rename things that exist? I don't see any other industry that does it.
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with groupthink as well. I think we have a tendency sometimes to breathe our own exhaust. So jargon begets jargon, and
I've not
sometimes you get
heard
a
that
group of
for a
people
long time.
together, and it just continues.
Yeah.
So, but I think you hold up the mirror, and I think there are opportunities to get out of that. Some of the best mentors that I had in marketing were the ones who encouraged me to try to get out of the marketing ivory tower,
Yeah.
to try to spend more time in the factory, spend more time in the field, spend more time, with actual consumers, and you quickly realize that some of the internal jargon just doesn't
Yeah.
resonate. So I think that's just an opportunity in a lot of ways that's for every marketer. It may relate somewhat to the increased specialization of marketing over time, where you don't have as many generalists, you have a lot of
Yeah.
specialists who can be very focused in your field. So I think it's just something that all marketers can do a little bit more often.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Tom. Let's have another look at one of Ryan's, which is the CMO quote generator, which is one of my favourite. I mean, this is an example of it. Change the rhetoric to suit the latest fad buzzword. You want to take us through a couple of these, Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, it was, I think, prompted actually by this first quote, which I was just seeing everywhere, which was customers are at the heart of everything we do. And then there were various slight variations on that like at the core or the center or whatever it is of everything we do. And I just kept saying it over and over again. And so it sort of came to me, that maybe I can do a template for how CMOs speak. And then the classic, we all know that advertising or TV or disruption or whatever it is dead. This kind of death wish that that marketers seem to have for a lot of the things that we do. And obviously, of course, they always have whatever the solution is, which they happen to offer to you. Our approach is agile or scalable or disruptive, and it's always the same things. And I'm sure that everybody that's listening today would have heard all of these many times.
Yeah, that scaling is an interesting one. I saw a dental ad the other day. We'll help scale your business. And I'm like, well, that's not what dentists use the word scale for,
No.
We all experience these and we all get frustrated. And you're not the only one in the room when you think, why are they speaking like that? It is quite a frustrating thing to sit there and think, am I the only one that thinks this is wrong? And yet it seems, as Tom, this group think that goes on, we tend not to speak up. And so everyone just rolls along with it. So anyway, Ryan, you said it really, this process revolves around the taking words and stripping them of all meaning, doesn't it? I mean, we're literally, most words in these new labels actually don't mean anything.
Yep. Yeah, and that's really what struck me most when I first sort of, got into marketing and moved into it, was just how much jargon there was. And it really got to me. As a writer, partly, I just found it so deadening. It's such stultifying language that often gets used, and as you say, it really doesn't have a lot of meaning in many cases. So
yeah.
Well,
it's like, I mean, I'll ask the audience again, is there one particular word that irritates you? If you want to post that up there, we can have a look at it. Mine's two, and it's thought leadership. And I remember writing a blog on this that said, if everyone's a thought leader, who's doing all the work? Anyway, look, a couple of serious questions to both of you, right? And the audience can add their thoughts if they want along the way. But why do you think there's such a variety of resources of satire available in the marketing industry? Tom, what do you think?
I think some of it relates to the fact that it's an industry that can sometimes take itself a bit too seriously. So I think it sets it up for parody. Some of it relates to what we were talking about a bit earlier, the groupthink, and that we tend to breathe our own exhaust. But I think we all need to laugh at ourselves. Some of it I think also relates to a bit of the change that we're going through. There's this quote I've always liked that technology changes exponentially, but organizations change logarithmically. And I think in some ways, marketing, because it's always attuned to change, it's paying attention to that, but the human component doesn't quite catch up. And so I think what humor lets us do is talk about these things we need to talk about when we're trying to navigate some of the challenges to do our work. And I actually think it's something that can apply to lots of different disciplines within business, but marketing tends to be the one that is often in the hot seat.
Well, I think I agree with Tom there, but I think one of the other reasons maybe is that we don't really have a professional standard as such in marketing. As you know, that a lot of people in marketing aren't formally trained. or haven't even necessarily studied some of the history. And I know Malcolm and I spoke about this the other day. And so I think it's just fertile territory for charlatanism, which is what I guess I try to lampoon a lot of the time.
Yeah. And we're one of the few industries that call themselves professionals, yet to be a professional, you've got to do continuing professional development and get accreditation like you do in law and accounting and medicine. But we don't, so anyone can step in and call themselves that. So if what you've both created highlights, a psychological or other issues within the industry, why aren't the senior executives acting to fix this and to stop this continuation?
I don't know. I don't know that it has to come from the top. I actually think, and I think it's dependent on the organizational culture. I've worked in some organizations that are very hierarchical and everyone's reluctant to speak, and you get a large meeting and everybody immediately looks to the most senior person in the room to start first, and everyone sort of trickles down from there. That's often, if I imagine a cultural environment that I'm poking fun at in a cartoon, it's sort of that. But I've been in a lot of organizations that aren't afraid to call attention to that, and I tend to lean on the side of I think the more that we can draw at these issues, and I see places that do, it creates an environment where people aren't as reluctant to speak their mind and talk about doing better work. And so I always try to, I don't know, when I draw cartoons, each week I draw a cartoon. I also write a bit about trying to point at examples of companies that are approaching things a little bit differently. So I try to point at ways that you can lean toward a solution. And marketing is constantly in a state of flux. So if I'm making fun of the status quo, I think there are other examples of marketers that are showing a way forward that could be a solution to some of the problems that we're all facing.
Right. Okay. Ryan, anything to add on that?
Yeah, well, I do agree, particularly about those organisations where there is a lot of groupthink, and I think the issue for obviously for some of the more junior people is that these buzzwords and so on really do become a bit of a code to show that you're part of the the in crowd, which is no different from a lot of other corporate situations. Yeah. But the other side of it, perhaps I think that plays a part is that there's a political dimension to it, and I think that's what we've seen with the rise of brand purpose, in recent years, where to even question some of that orthodoxy is really dangerous to your career for some people. So that's the other side of it, I think.
Yeah, speaking your mind can get you into trouble if you're not careful. But I do say I've been into offices where both your cartoons or pages from your book are framed on the walls, and I think, okay, these people get it, because that helps set the culture. So let's have a bit of fun. First, I'm going to show you 3 of your cartoons, Tom, that you said had the most engagement. Get you to quickly explain each one. I'll invite the audience to decide which cartoon of these 3 they thought had the most engagement, and then we'll come back to that later in the show. So over to you. We'll just get you to take us through each one. Thanks, Tom.
That sounds good. Yeah, I think these all touched on different moments in time where everyone was trying to grapple with 3 different phenomenons. So the first one relates to AI. On the left side, you have 2 people talking. AI turns this single bullet point into a long email I can pretend I wrote. And on the right-hand side, AI makes a single bullet point out of this long email I can pretend I read. So that was one within a month or 2 of the launch of ChatGPT.
And very appropriate too. Right, second one.
And second one. Okay, here we have a few executives around a table. Digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. And then there's this big COVID-19 wrecking ball coming from the side.
Which changed everything.
And this one I drew pretty quickly after the lockdown started.
And very appropriate too, because nobody saw that coming. And what's our third one?
I've since created versions of this cartoon, updating it with other wrecking balls, including ChatGPT. So the analogy holds true. Okay. More than one wrecking ball in marketing.
All right, let's look at the third.
And then the third one goes back to the Internet of Things. I think my Nest smoke alarm is going off. Google AdWords just pitched me a fire extinguisher and an offer for temporary housing. And this was pretty early in some of the commentary about the Internet of Things. I think Google had just acquired Nest. That was the motivating fact for
okay.
this cartoon.
All right, well, we'll come back to those and see which one got the most engagement and why. What we're going to look at is some of Ryan's favourite pages and get you to explain these to us. So the first one is marketing laws, and you said these reflect how much marketing has changed.
Yeah, it feels like it was a long time ago now that I wrote this one. But when I read it recently, I thought, oh yeah, they still seem pretty appropriate. So choose digital first, ask questions later. I think that definitely still holds. The target. Oh, sorry, I can't actually see that on screen. But when others zig, then you must zig too.
Yeah, I do like that. When
fad is a
everyone else
foolproof
zigs,
way.
you should zig too. I think that's brilliant.
Well, I
Everyone's
think it
following
really does. Yeah, it really does reflect a reality of how a lot of people do things, and obviously completely anathema to the original intention of that quote.
Zig and zag.
What else is up there? Sorry, I can't see it at the moment.
Yeah, talking is the new thinking.
Talking is the new thinking. Yeah,
All
sounds
right.
very true, which
Well,
pretty much goes back to what we were saying before.
Okay, well, let's move to the next one, which is about the generations. And I think this is probably one of the most truest things. And it highlights the fact that generational differences are hugely overstated by marketers. And there's far more variation within the generations than there is between them. I love these other shared characteristics.
Yeah, so generational groupings are one of my greatest bugbears about the way that marketing is discussed in the industry. As you mentioned before, I previously worked in psychiatry and I studied psychiatry, obviously. So I think I've got a reasonable understanding of human psychology, and because of that, I just have found it ludicrous that marketers talk about these generational groupings as if they're a homogeneous group of people, when clearly that is not true.
Well, yeah,
So
well,
it's bizarre
I've got
that we would want to group them like that.
I have a 20-year-old son, and 10 years ago we went to see the Rolling Stones, and halfway through the show, this 45-year-old in front turned around and said, "Your son knows more lyrics than I do." It's like, it's just their playlists go back 50, 60 years. They're not just the last 5 years. So the next one I do like as well, this whole concept of brand love, and debunking the notion that consumers are in love with brands. And I think this one, it's as much the illustration says it as the words.
Yeah, so it just kind of occurred to me, I had it in my mind that brand love was a load of bollocks, and then I thought, oh, hang on, that could actually make quite a nice visual if I turn that upside down. But I think that's the case. It's, when you look at it, really, there is very little evidence for consumers falling in love with brands, and I think in How Brands Grow, Byron Sharp essentially discredited the notion. Yeah. And yet we still have this, a lot of talk about marketers, talking about consumers falling in love with their brands and really kind of overstating the importance of brands in people's lives.
Well, even worse is this term of customer journey, like the customers plan journeys. Here's one for toilet paper. We're out of toilet paper. Can you buy some when you're at the shop? There's your customer journey,
Yeah, so I think this was prompted by, just seeing the same kind of cliches in modern taglines just over and over again, and just how meaningless they were compared to, some of those classic taglines of old. So driving ambition, I think, was almost literally a tagline that I saw for a car. Whereas, we try harder obviously was genius and set up, the entire brand for decades. And then I got into some sillier ones. So Got Milk became pasteurization fuel utilization, and Beans Mean Times became beanfulness redefined. So they're not that far off what you would see. And interestingly, I actually put this up on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, just as an excerpt from the book, and got a few comments to the effect of the ones on the right sound like they were written by ChatGPT, which they weren't, because ChatGPT wasn't around when I wrote it. But I guess that makes the point perfectly. They really are robotic and kind of churned out without much thought to what goes behind it. This is an ad, but it's not really an ad. It certainly doesn't have a logo, and you'll never know who it's for. But it just solved climate change and created world peace because Gen Z or something. And then the little sign off is, "We think capitalism is evil too. Now give us money." Yeah. And I think that what prompted this one was essentially what you see in that sign off, which is this real discomfort that I think a lot of people in advertising have with the notion of selling. And there's this real tension between their own ideals and the commercial imperative of advertising. And so you get this kind of awkward marriage between activist principles and kind of commercial objectives.
Yeah. And this silly term of it's not salesy, or as if sales is negative. I mean, good sales, people love being sold to. They call it great customer service. You know, this fear of selling in our industry is appalling, because that's the purpose of the industry. You know, nothing happens unless a sale. Without a sale, there is no commerce. So, okay, let's move on, because I do suggest if you haven't seen or haven't got a copy of Brian's books, then treat yourself to copies, folks. They make great reading, and you can use them in meetings too. I do have a functional use for the bush, which is in meetings. If somebody does start to quote these silly things, I just lean over and give them a little tap on the side of the head and say, here, spend an hour or two looking through this, and then you won't be saying that sort of stuff anymore. So let's see. Now what we'll do is we'll get Tom to take us back through the 3 cartoons and tell us the sort of engagement they got and which one was the winner.
Yeah. Whoops. It looked like the AI one was up there first. That was actually the winner. That one became more viral than any other cartoon I've ever drawn. I think it was just the moment when everyone's trying to figure out how to make sense of ChatGPT, and this whole idea that, as I've heard it described, endless words that nobody wants. Yeah, so the AI cartoon, I think it struck a chord where people were trying to find the right way to talk about it. I think we're all witnessing this phenomenon of being able to create endless words, and you have a limited audience size, and as the arms race continues, as more people have the ability to write more than ever before, the recipients of that, the arms race is continuing as well to winnow it down. So that one ended up really striking a chord. And I think I did that right around the time, a little before when LinkedIn announced that it would allow you to do even more, to use your expression earlier, thought leadership, with just a quick ChatGPT button, which you end up with a lot of more of the same out there, just that you need to
I find LinkedIn, so I saw an example recently where 2 people replied to a post using the ChatGPT function within LinkedIn, and it was an identical response. Now, why you would need a machine to give a response to something without thinking yourself, and underneath, they didn't even notice, but both of them had exactly the same response generated by a computer. That's frightening. Yes. That is frightening. So, sorry, let's go quickly through the other 2 and the sort of response you got to those.
Yeah, so the next one up, let's see, the COVID one. I think that was just a case of a moment of everyone experiencing that at the same time. I came across something around that time that said, who is the biggest driver of digital transformation in your organization? The CEO, the CTO, or COVID-19? And that partly inspired that one. So everyone was talking about how to make digital transformation happen, and that was right in that zone where all these projects that were going to take years were suddenly taking weeks. So I feel like it happened to hit at the right time when people were trying to find a way to talk about that. Right. And the cartoon became an easily shared visual for them to do it.
Okay, and the next one, the third one?
Yeah, so this was the Internet of Things,
yeah,
which happened to come out about a week before the Davos conference, where the Internet of Things was a big topic of discussion. And so it again sort of struck a chord. It got shared on one of the stages at Davos. A lot of people were sort of talking about this as a topic, and this became a sort of a shorthand. I found the cartoons that generally have done the best have been the ones where it tapped into some pre-existing conversation. Yeah. And the AI one, at least to date, has been the one that struck the chord the most.
I think it'll be relevant for a while. You also do some work within organisations about humour in business. Can you just share a little bit about what you do with that?
Yeah, I do. I speak a lot at a lot of organizations, talking about humor as a leadership and a communication skill, kind of on the topic of what we were saying earlier. It just lets you talk about things that are otherwise hard to talk about. And I think it's a sign of a healthy culture if the culture allows you to laugh at yourselves and what everybody's kind of struggling with together. So I do a lot of speaking at organizations, and I work with a lot of organizations to create custom cartoons to help represent specific situations that those organizations are going through. I had a chance to be the cartoonist at residence at the Stanford Graduate School of Business in their first ever course on the power of humor as a leadership skill.
Yep.
And there was this takeaway that of something they called the humor cliff, where they measured the average number of times a person laughs over the course of their day, and they track it over a lifetime. It was this big Gallup study, and they find that right when people leave university and join their first jobs, it falls off a cliff, and people are reluctant to bring their senses of humor to work.
Wow.
And their big lesson from the class is don't fall off the cliff and bring your sense of humor to your day job more frequently. And so that's something that if I have a mission of sorts, that's what I'm trying to do, is to help more organizations feel comfortable laughing at themselves to try to do their best work.
Wow, in fact, that's timely, because through the magic of technology, and I know we've had a couple of glitches here today, but an iPad has appeared in my hand. And I got some question, and this one comes from Mark. He says, both Tom and Ryan are hysterical to those of us seeing the tsunami of jargon and BS inside corporations. They make us aware of the inanity of what passes for professionalism in marketing. How can we increase the use of this type of humour to train early career marketers to be more sceptical of the latest piece of shiny material in the next meetings? Any thoughts, Ryan?
Well, I think exactly as Tom was describing there. I mean, one of the things that I first found when I was presenting, I think maybe at conferences, but also even to clients, was that whenever I used one of Tom's cartoons, there was this almost sigh of relief from people at the fact that it had been lightened, and that you could actually look at these things in a less serious way. And one of the expressions I've used before is that it allows us to punch with a velvet glove, because it allows you to say things that you wouldn't be able to say necessarily in a serious way. And so it really just opens up that conversation to a more real conversation, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, okay. Tom, here's one more cartoon, which is from Cannes last week. Thanks, Ryan. Or last month, sorry. And it's the last one for the show today. But what was the funniest thing you gleaned from Cannes?
So anyway, this cartoon, humor in general is a big theme for Cannes. For the first time ever, they have humor as a category or a subcategory within communication. And so humor is being talked about a lot. I found it entertaining that a lot of times they would talk about humor by bringing in a professional comedian rather than tapping into, like, let's just use our everyday sense of humor more frequently. But I'd say the biggest thing I found humorous walking around Cannes is that you're in this beautiful city, and it's filled with marketers, and a lot of the talk is exactly what we've been describing earlier, all the buzzwords.
Yep.
You're not hearing French, you're hearing marketing buzzwords. So I found that personally entertaining, that you know how difficult it is to get out of the bubble.
The ultimate bubble, yeah, that's right. Final thought, Ryan, what do you think marketers need to do to lift their game in this space? How do we change the environment so that we stop living in this bubble or stop using this sort of language?
Well, one of the things which I've always espoused is that people should actually get some kind of training in marketing fundamentals. So whether that's formal or not, but certainly, you can't really go too wrong by doing Mark Ritson's mini MBA in marketing, because I just think it then kind of prevents this tendency to want to over egg the pudding, if you like, and kind of make up these new terms and sort of go along with all this jargon. So that's the first thing, and really just not to focus so much on, as Tom said earlier, the shiny new things, not get caught up in all the latest trends and new channels and so on. Just
live real and remember your sense of humour. Well, I hope you both can continue to keep the industry on its toes and laughing regularly, because I certainly enjoy what happens each week. Hopefully the audience enjoyed today's show. We'd love to know what your thoughts are. Let us know over time. But thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate the two of us. I think we could talk for hours on this and go through all the cartoons and the humour and the things we've experienced. And I do recommend that those in the audience, if you haven't already, buy some quality reading material, because you've got a number of books there. You've got both of Ryan's. You've got Tom's, your logo, which is a history of cartoons. I think it's 15 years of your cartoons, is it, Tom, of the best?
That's right, yeah.
Your logo ignored here. Yeah, okay, and also subscribe to Tom's newsletter. So go to Marketoonist there and subscribe to it. So thanks very much for your participation. Really appreciate it, lads. And look forward to the audience feedback. Now, we were planning the next episode to cover artificial intelligence, but we've had a conflict with one of the speakers, so we've changed it. So the next show on the 7th of 8th is actually how to build a genuine personal brand that people respect, not a fake thought leader veneer, which taps into what we've been talking a bit about today. The guests will include the Queen of Personal Branding, Petra Zink, who's the author of Trusted Authority, from technical expert to trusted authority, go from unknown to known, and the brand guy, Richard Salman, who is ranked in the global top 30 brand gurus. He'll share his power branding techniques and what to do when you lose control of your brand narrative, which he did when he recently became the oldest groom in Married at First Sight on television. So going to be a fascinating episode. Get your tickets, they're free at thebigmarketingshow.global. We'll see you on the 7th and 8th of August. Thanks again, Tom and Ryan, really appreciate it. And thank you for the audience, bye for now.